Well, here's what else is going on. Qatar's Minister of State for Defense, Khalid Al-Attiyah, has arrived in Washington. Saudi Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir is there too. He's been meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. We'll talk about that shortly with our correspondent at the State Department. But Russia, meanwhile, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has discussed this dispute with Saudi Arabia's King Salman and told him that the crisis isn't helping efforts to find a solution to Syria's war. Well, I'm very pleased to welcome now to the news grid the Qatari Ambassador to Russia, Fahad bin Mohamed Al-Attiyah. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for being with us on Al Jazeera. We've heard the Russian reaction there, talking about the implications for the war in Syria. What do you respond to that? And what has been Russia's message to you, to the state of Qatar?
Well, thank you for having me. The Russian message is very clear. I mean, there is a coalition that involves Qatar, Russia, Turkey, the US, and members of the GCC to fight terrorism and ISIS. And what this conflict has done is really disintegrate that coalition and leave the space for the terrorists as a result of the aggression by the three countries against one key member of the alliance, leave the space for them to basically grow. This is the message that Russia is trying to send, that it's not a diplomatic rift as most people want to present it. It is really an illegal blockade, and such violations of international law certainly will not promote the consolidation of efforts on Syria and of the wider fight against terrorists.
As far as Qatar is concerned, does this crisis change your role in any way, your involvement in the Syria crisis?
No, it doesn't change our commitment. We're still very committed to fighting the war against terror, and certainly committed in trying to resolve a peaceful resolution to the Syrian conflict.
Now, there's quite a bit of diplomacy going on right now to try and resolve this crisis between Qatar and Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, which have imposed this partial blockade on Qatar. We've seen various leaders this week in Europe and now in the US, in Washington, D.C. Kuwait, which is acting right now as a main mediator in this crisis, says this must be resolved through the GCC. Do you share this view, or do you feel that other world powers, the United States, needs to get involved at this stage?
Well, of course, we share the view of our brothers in Kuwait and very much appreciate the role that His Highness Sheikh Sabah is playing in mediating the conflict between the three parties. But let's establish first that what they have committed is a violation of international law by imposing a blockade on Qatar. And this matter, if not resolved through mediation, I think it should go to the Security Council. And in that instance, I think members of the Security Council, such as the US, Russia, and other players, would probably have to intervene to undo the violation to begin with. First of all, condemn it, and then undo it, and then call the parties to come around the table of dialogue. Ambassador
Al-Attiyah, do you feel the US is an honest broker in this crisis, can be an honest broker, a good mediator to resolve this dispute?
Well, it can certainly be. I mean, we are one of the strongest allies of the US in the region. We've been having long-standing relationships around the security area, education, oil and gas. And I think the US can play certainly a constructive role.
But Ambassador, with all due respect, we've heard a very different tone from the US President Donald Trump this past week. He's had some very tough words for Qatar.
Again, I mean, I believe most of that information is built on this baseless misinformation campaign that emanates from UAE and Saudi Arabia. And I think it had started weeks in advance. And obviously, we did not see that coming, that all this was to prepare for the grounds for what I would call the greatest confusion of all times in the minds of some of the global leaders. But I'd like to urge our allies in the US and certainly the White House to rely on US institutions who have been in close engagement with Qatar over the years and who know the record of our country and what we have contributed to the fight against terror.
This dispute crisis is certainly unprecedented. There have been tensions in the past, but this has never reached the level that it has right now. Ambassador, even if it's resolved, do you think that things can go back to the way they were, that the Gulf Cooperation Council can continue to work the way it did?
Well, I would like to be hopeful on this regard, but I would certainly say that Qatar have shown great restraint in handling this affair, this crisis, and we have not slipped into making the public be part of that discourse, just like the other three countries have done, where they have sort of dropped the rhetoric to the social level, and that certainly will have some impact on the long term. But one is hopeful that reconciliation will be not only at the political level but also at the social level will become a necessary factor in rebuilding our relationships.
Okay, one last question before we let you go, Ambassador. The Qatari Foreign Minister has said that the foundation for talks is not there yet. What would need to happen as far as Qatar is concerned for this to take place, for the talks to begin?
First of all, we need to honor the agreements that all the GCC members have signed into, the regional ones, and certainly the international legal system. We would urge Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Bahrain to stop violating the international legal system, and if they had any issues or any problems, to present them along the various organizations that we're all party to. Short than that, I think, plus we don't know exactly what accusations are being thrown against this. It's just based on hearsay and what we hear in the media. And nothing has been presented to us, as far as I'm concerned, officially.
Okay, Ambassador, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on the News Grid. Fahad bin Mohamed Al-Attiyah is Qatar's ambassador in Russia. He was joining us there via Skype from Moscow. Thank you very much indeed for your time.